I began writing Losing Linda May, a Cancer Caregiving Memoir in 2017, and I finished the first draft in early 2018. Throughout the rest of 2018 and through 2019, I was editing the book and I was submitting it to literary agents and I was trying desperately to get it published through the traditional route. However, at the time, I didn't know that two major events were on the horizon. One was that I was going to be diagnosed with Hodgkin lymphoma and go through cancer treatment myself, and the other was that there was a global pandemic on the way. Earlier this year, when I decided to self-publish the book, I went back to the last draft that I had of it, which is from February of 2020. In those 5 years, I had not read the book in its entirety. When I went back through it, one of the moments from July 18th stopped me in my tracks. My sister and I were getting my mom ready to leave her room so that she could go on a walk through the unit that she was on for her stem cell transplant. And to do so, she had to put on latex gloves and a disposable face mask. When I read that passage, it stopped me in my tracks because it wasn't until that moment that I remembered how lax it was when it came to communicable diseases and viruses and bacteria while my mom was going through her stem cell transplant in 2015. The difference between then and when I went through my stem cell transplant in 2022 was night and day. Obviously, during my stem cell transplant and all of my hospitalized treatments, I was on high alert for COVID, and I was always in protective gear in between whenever I was outside of my apartment just to prevent myself from getting COVID and having all my treatments be delayed. It weighed on me constantly. There was never a day that I didn't worry about getting COVID, not only because of my immunocompromised state, but also just what it meant for my ongoing treatment. But it wasn't just COVID. I had every sickness on the mind. I was so cautious, like we all were during the early days of the pandemic when we were sanitizing groceries and chip bags and anything that came into our apartment because we didn't know what caused COVID at that point. That was my reality through the entirety of my treatment. I always had to take a COVID test either before I was allowed to be admitted or right when I was admitted, because then if it was positive after I had been admitted, then I would be quarantined. I could still receive treatment at that point because I had the vaccines, and so I wasn't so immunocompromised that it would have decimated me, but I was a risk factor for the other patients. So if I did happen to have COVID and I was in the hospital, then I would have been completely quarantined. I know that process because during my stem cell transplant hospitalization, someone potentially exposed me. The identity was never officially revealed to me, but I'm almost 100% certain that it was the chaplain who had come by one day and we had a long conversation, so I expected that she would come back again, but she never returned, and then suddenly I had been exposed to COVID. And during that time, I hadn't interacted with any of the other patients, I didn't have any visitors, and all the medical staff had been wearing their masks and protective gear, so it didn't seem like anyone else was a likely contractor of the disease. I was quarantined and all the medical staff had to suit up every time they entered my room and put on extra layers of protective gear so that they could then disrobe after they left me, so that they didn't shed anything as they went to another room to work with other patients. And then there was a hazard sign placed outside of my door warning anyone who entered that I might actually have COVID, which I never did contract it. And after testing negative for a few days, then I was allowed to go back into the world of my stem cell transplant unit. Because I was diagnosed in November of 2020, I didn't know a world of going through cancer treatment without the looming threat of COVID-19 or anything else that I could possibly contract. Getting sick while I was sick was a constant fear. So when I go back to the time that my mom was going through her cancer treatment, particularly her stem cell transplant, where she was so immunocompromised, I'm baffled by how little precautions were in place to keep her safe. Like I said, in this moment, we see her suit up in protective gear as she goes out to take a walk in her unit, but we as her caregivers are constantly traipsing in and out of the unit. We're going to the cafeteria, we're living our daily lives outside of the hospital, we're not wearing masks, we're not protecting ourselves, we're not sanitizing things, we're not constantly getting tested for any type of communicable diseases. Honestly, it's a miracle that she didn't get sick because none of us caregivers who were interacting with her on a daily basis were focused on our health. We were just fixated on hers. We were sleeping like shit, we were eating like shit, and we were so stressed out, which is a perfect recipe for catching something. While going through cancer treatment during the pandemic made it all that much harder, especially in those early days when we didn't have the vaccine and we didn't have any immunity, I'm so glad about where we have landed when it comes to the precautions that individuals who are going through treatment now take. Whenever I go to my regular oncology appointments or have my annual scan to determine if I'm still in remission, I always see individuals who are actively going through treatment and their caregivers wearing masks and sometimes protective gloves. Those precautions, while admittedly annoying and uncomfortable, are so helpful for individuals who are immunocompromised. I think if there was a study done that compared the number of individuals who got sick during a hospitalization pre-pandemic compared to the number of individuals who got sick during a hospitalization post-pandemic, you would see a stark difference between the two numbers. Of course, individuals who are going through treatment and their caregivers have to shoulder the burden of protecting themselves, but I think we're in such a better place now when it comes to the precautions that individuals take around people who are immunocompromised. Tomorrow, July 19th, I'll be releasing a video about working while being a caregiver. So hit subscribe, leave any questions in the comments, and I'll see you all tomorrow.